Hello, biology students, and welcome to another episode of FOM's Face Place. This is going to be the last video. It's going to be a video for the last 3 days, which includes April 15th through 17th. So just one long video for the last 3 days. The last things I want to talk about are how organisms obtain their energy, but also how they obtain the matter necessary to keep them alive and how that transfers throughout an ecosystem. So first of all, let's look at how organisms get their energy. Depending upon the type of organism you are, you're going to get your energy either by maybe producing it, by taking sunlight, using photosynthesis, taking energy from the sun to create food, and then you are able to access that food for the energy. Those are what autotrophs do. Autotrophs make their own food. We also call these producers, though, because these producers, they produce food inside them, which can then be used for themselves, or if you're an organism that can't make your own food, then you eat these organisms and then you get your food that way. So those are producers. This includes things like plants, algae, and even some bacteria as producers. But if you don't make your own food, you can't capture energy from the sun and make food, then you are what we call a heterotroph. Heterotrophs must consume other organisms for energy and matter. It doesn't matter if you consume animals or plants or fungi or anything. If you have to consume another organism to get your energy, you are called a heterotroph. But we also call these consumers because they consume, they bring in. If plants are producers, or autotrophs are producers, then heterotrophs are consumers. And there's 4 different types, and 2 of them are pretty easy to understand. These different types, or sorry, 3 of them are easy to understand, these different types of consumers. Herbivores are the first ones. They are the organisms that eat only plants. So think of any animal out there that eats only plants, something like a goat. They don't eat other animals. Kind of hate to see that, but they only eat other plants. They eat plants, so we call them herbivores. Vor means to eat, so they eat plants. Herbiv, that's spelled wrong. That should be Herbivores, herbivores, not herbivores. But this includes things like cows, rabbits, and grasshoppers. But if you do not consume plants and instead you consume other animals, then you are considered a carnivore. Carnivores eat other animals. This includes things like lions, tigers, foxes, wolves, and spiders. So all of these organisms are considered to be carnivores. They're animals that eat other animals. Kind of fierce too. But what if you eat both types of organisms? If you eat plants and animals, well, then you are considered an omnivore. Omni means many or multi or all, and omnivores eat practically anything. They eat plants and animals. This includes things like bears, humans. We are herbivores or omnivores. We eat all kinds of stuff, and even mockingbirds, which will eat insects and seeds and other types of berries. Those are all organisms that get their energy or their matter from plants or animals. But there's another group of organisms where they don't consume other organisms. They instead consume decaying material. We call these detritivores. Detritus is dead organic matter, and detritivores will live off of this dead decaying matter. This includes things like your fungi and your moss, or fungi and your bacteria. They are also called decomposers because they eat the dead stuff and they help break it down. What's great about these decomposers is that they help recycle a lot of the nutrients that you find in an ecosystem. So they're breaking stuff down into smaller and smaller pieces, and then other organisms around them can use it. So for example, plants can use the stuff that the mushrooms produce because it's smaller matter. They can take the nitrogen locked up in dead leaves or dead animals, and then they make that available for plants to use. So 4 types of strategies on obtaining energy. And then there's 2 strategies, and there's 4 different types of one of those strategies. So herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and detritivores, they must consume other organisms for energy. But autotrophs, they're all types of heterotrophs. Autotrophs make their own food, typically through photosynthesis. So the last thing I need to cover is how energy moves through an ecosystem. Uh, you can go outside and kind of create a chain of organisms to see how energy and matter moves through an ecosystem. We call these food chains. It's a pretty simple idea. You start off with some type of organism that makes energy available or makes food available for all the other organisms in an area. And that typically starts off with your producers. Now, looking at the food chain here, you can see that at the top we have the periwinkle plant. Typically, producers are at the bottom of the food chain. This includes your plants, can even be bacteria. But when you go to the next type of organism that can consume that plant, we call that a trophic level. Trophic levels are the levels of organisms as you move up or up a food chain or even through a food web. So this is a trophic level. This is a trophic level. Trophic level, trophic level, trophic level. But you start off typically with your producers because they make the energy available for all the other organisms in that area. But the problem with food chains is that if this moth were to eat that plant, that moth would not get all of the energy that that plant possibly contains. There's a large amount of energy that gets lost throughout the process of consuming. For example, we all produce waste like we all poop, right? Well, there's actually energy in that poop, but we weren't able to access all that energy because there's just some energy we just can't get a hold of. So we release that waste, which contains all kinds of energy. But typically the sun is what provides all of the energy for an ecosystem, and then that sunlight will go to the plants. They undergo photosynthesis and they produce food like glucose, and then some organism comes around and eats the plant, and now they're able to access the energy that first started off with the sun. So you start off with first trophic level here, and then you go through the food chain. Now this food chain is going down. Food chains can go up, left, or right. It doesn't really matter as long as you follow the arrow, which shows the amount of energy. But if you take a whole bunch of food chains and you put them together, then you begin to have a food web. See, feeding relationships, the competition for resources isn't just a straight shot. There are multiple populations in an area competing for resources, and some of those organisms eat other organisms in the food chain. Sometimes one specific organism could have at least 5 or 6 different other organisms that eat that first organism. Looking at mice, for example. Field mice can be eaten by a number of different things. So all of those organisms that eat the mice are competing with each other, and the mouse has to make sure, I got to avoid all of these different predators. So you have a lot of these complex food chains. You put them all together, you get a better picture, a bigger overall picture of the relationships in that area. Then you can now have a food web. Just like a spider's web has all of these little parts that are connected to each other, a food chain shows you all the different feeding relationships in that area. And what you could do is take this picture and you could trace a number of different food chains. So starting with the grasshopper, you can go to the praying mantis, which would then be eaten by this vole, this little ugly creature, but then that could be eaten by this ferret, which will then be eaten by that owl. So that's just one possible food chain. If you look at that ferret, well, that ferret's not eating the bird, or sorry, the ferret is eating the bird, but what's not happening is the bird is not eating the ferret. If you have an arrow coming away from you, going towards another animal, this animal is going to eat you. So this woodpecker is not going to be eaten, or it's not going to eat the ferret. The ferret will eat the woodpecker. Don't make that mistake. Let me move my thing here. So don't worry about page 43. That's old notes. Don't worry about that. So a number of different food chains in that food web. Well, food webs aren't the only way that we can show how food and energy move through an ecosystem. You can do things called food pyramids. And these pyramids show you based upon how big the pyramid is, where you find the most stuff in an ecosystem. If producers are making all the food available, then you probably need to have a whole bunch of producers. And this food pyramid shows you that at the base, you have all of the producers. You should always have more producers in any kind of ecosystem. This is a biomass pyramid, which shows you the amount of living mass in an area. And you're going to find by far more mass of living stuff or producers at the bottom. And as you work your way to the top, you're going to find less and less. So for example, this hawk, you're not going to find, if you take all the hawks in an area and you take the amount of mass in those hawks, well, it would not be nearly as much as the amount of fish mass that you would find. And then bigger fish require a whole lot more smaller fish to support that. So pyramids are really great in showing you the amount of material that's available in that area, and you're always going to find producers at the bottom. Same thing here with this little cool picture there. But the problem is, even though there's all of this material, not all of the energy moves up into the next level. Let's say that there was 1 million of this, 1 million units of energy in this level. When you consume other organisms, you don't get to tap into all that energy. There is going to be lost energy in the form of waste. So you will typically experience going from one level, one trophic level, to the next trophic level above it, you will experience roughly a 90% loss of energy. If there is 10 million units of energy in the lower level, well, if we experience a 90% loss of energy, only 1 million units of energy would be available in this next level. Even though you eat something, it doesn't mean that you're able to access all of that energy. Same thing with the amount of material. When you produce waste, you lose mass that way. So you don't use all of that mass. So always remember that. You're going to experience a 90% loss, or you can say only 10% of the energy moves up to the next level. But you typically start off with a producer at the bottom, and then when you go up to the next level, this is what we call the first level consumers. They are the ones that access the energy made by the producers first. So that's the first level consumer. Then you go up to the next level, that is the second level consumer. And then you go to the next level, that is a third level consumer, and so on until you get to at the very top, which is what we call the apex level. They are the top of the food chain, or top of the food web, top of the food period. We call them the apex. All right, so that is it for this 2 weeks worth of notes. You will have an assignment on a Google Doc that you must complete and then turn in at the end of the week. It will be, I just covered 3 days worth of videos in this one video, and then who knows what's going to happen after this week. So I hope that you guys are learning something. I hope that you understand what I'm covering. If you have any questions, make sure you pop into my virtual office hour, shoot me an email. You can contact me through Mime 101, meet me on Google Meet or in Zoom, whatever, but I'm always there to help you out. So unless I'm not doing this again, then I will talk to you later. But if I'm not doing this again, hey, it was great having you guys as a class. See you later.